Roguelites have become one of the most popular genres in the last few years. This genre has some of the greatest games of all time. They've really changed gaming for the better. You can look at a game like Binding of Isaac, which released initially in September of 2011 as the main pioneer for this genre. Though obviously it wasn't the first roguelite or light game ever, but I view it as the first major release. Of course, we've had a lot of other major hit games in the last 12 years besides Isaac that have gained a lot of traction. A perfect example of that is Hades. Almost anyone you ask in the gaming sphere will know what Hades is, and if they've played it, they'll say they most likely enjoyed it. Well, that's the case in my experience. Everyone loves Hades. But what are the best roguelike games released in this past year, in 2022? Well, obviously when I'm recording this, it's only October, so there's still a couple months in the year. But I feel I found the top 10 roguelike games that have been released this year already. Please understand, this is a personal opinion, and I haven't been able to play every single new roguelike. So if your favorite isn't on this list, don't get too upset. Just leave a comment about it, and I can look into playing it. And lastly, before we start this list, I'm gonna say that games that were released into early access, released out of early access, or just straight up released in 2022 are the games we're gonna look at. So let's begin. Number 10, starting this list off hot, is Curse to Golf, which was one of my most anticipated releases this year. And don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed it. A golfing roguelike that has you traverse through golf purgatory, which is filled with challenging holes, unique NPCs, and your cute little golfer. I really enjoyed this game and did get all the achievements while beating the game. And I thought it would be higher on the list, but really, it lacks a lot of replayability, and I feel that's super important in this list. It doesn't have any difficulty options as well. It's just a really hard game. You do have ace cards that make the game significantly easier, and the ace cards are super fun. I believe Curse to Golf would highly benefit from multiplayer and a stage builder to help keep players engaged outside of a first clear. But I'll say, I wasn't disappointed in this game in the slightest. It's just that 2022 had a lot of great roguelike games released. Number 9 is probably a game that deserves to be higher in the list. It's just sadly this game suffered from me not playing it enough. But it's still a very enjoyable experience, and it's Astral Ascent. You pick between 4 characters and travel through the garden, which has 4 worlds total and 12 bosses you can fight. The game was released into early access on April 12th, and as of making this video has 3 of the 4 playable characters finished, while having 7 bosses spread across 3 worlds. The final 4th world is still in development, and the developers even stated on a roadmap that a 5th character will be released once the game is fully released. It also states it will fully release in 2023. That said, games thrown into early access this year count, so deal with it being on the list. But this game has a lot, and I'll quickly summarize ins and outs of a run. Outside of a run, you have 3 mechanics which allow you to improve the run. You can upgrade your damage / currency, you can buy more spells to find in a run, and lastly, you can buy more auras to get in runs. You earn crest by playing runs and doing quests that NPCs in the garden give. Now, inside of a run, there's so many free rooms to get spells, upgrades, anything you need. Also in a run, you unlock keys and quartz, which are then used in shops or to get upgrades. Astral Ascent has a lot of content for a game that's only $25, and I'm hopefully gonna play more. I probably missed a lot to cover, but this can't be a video on Astral Ascent, so I'll leave it at that. In my short playtime, I was only able to get past chapter 1, but the combat was very satisfying and feels pretty hard to master. The game has a lot of potential going forward. Coming in at number 8, we have a cute, simple game called Peglin, a Panchico roguelike. If you don't know what Panchico is, think of Peggle. But in Peglin, you play as a little green goblin and collect special orbs that all have different abilities and damage. You throw the orbs down and hit as many pegs as possible, with each peg hit doing more damage to enemies. The game currently has 3 worlds, with each world ending in a challenging boss fight. It was released into early access on April 25th, and like Astral Ascent, it doesn't plan on leaving early access until 2023. But like I said before, games released into early access this year count because that's my list. I've been able to clear a Peglin run once, and with that I was able to unlock Crucible mode, which adds more difficulty to each run. Currently there's 7 Crucible levels, with 8 to 12 coming in a future update. The game has a lot of replayability of those difficulty enhancers, and each area has 2 different bosses. Another future update does have a 4th shorter area being added with an optional boss, which according to the devs will be very hard. I never really played these Panchico-esque games before, but Peglin was a great surprise for me, and its simple gameplay with cute graphics does equate to a fun time. I will say though, the runs can be pretty RNG based on you hoping to get a good relic, and the price tag's a little hefty at about $20 US, but overall this is still a great game and my 8th best roguelite of the year. Number 7 is the most recently released game on this list, coming from a well-known franchise, and that's Shovel Knight Dig. I recently made a video on the game as a whole and covered everything to know, but to summarize, Drill Knight, the main villain, steals a giant bag of gems, and you dig down through levels gathering gems and chasing them down. The game has 4 worlds total, with each world having 3 levels before fighting a boss. You want to collect as many gems as possible, as it allows you to buy health items and character enhancements in the run. And outside of a run, it allows you to buy new armor, shortcuts to worlds, and upgrades to find. There's obviously more available, but that's the gist of it. I've been able to clear the game once, and overall, I did enjoy the game quite a bit. The graphics are beautiful, and Shovel Knight has never looked so good. The music fits the environment very well, and the combat feels good. The game is very fast-paced, as you're always being chased by a drill that could kill you instantly, but there isn't too much to explore. The secrets you find in levels are usually pretty easy to get to, and I know that there's a secret boss in the game, but I haven't found them yet. But after clearing the game once, I didn't find much desire to go back through it again, as everything else seems to stay the same, with no difficulty enhancers. With that, the price tag is also pretty hefty at $25, but I still got my money's worth, I'd say. The game is also available on the App Store for iPhones and iPads, so the accessibility is pretty nice. But if all of that still being said, this game still comes in number 7 for my top 10. Number 6 is an interesting one, and that's 20 Minutes Till Dawn. It's one of the many games that have spawned into the bullet hell-esque survival genre after the success of Vampire Survivors, which is not on this list, by the way, because as of making this video, Vampire Survivors is still in early access, and it released in December of last year. 20 Minutes Till Dawn, on the other hand, released June 8th in the early access. This is another game I did make a video on, comparing it to Vampire Survivors, and really, this game is a lot of fun. The premise is the same as Vampire Survivors, where you try to live for a certain amount of time while enemies just spawn. You level up for gaining XP, and you can upgrade your gun or the little partners that you can unlock. 20 Minutes Till Dawn also lets you pick between 7 characters and 7 starting weapons. In your runs, you unlock runes, which allow you to have upgrades for your characters. The gameplay itself in the game is very nice and simple. I love it, but after a run is beat, you unlock difficulty enhancers called Darkness, which go all the way up to 15. So you have a lot of potential to make your runs as challenging as you want. I've been able to clear the game once in my many attempts, and every single run is always a lot of fun. The game feels a lot harder than Vampire Survivors because you have to aim yourself compared to the game aiming for you, but really, it's a lot of fun. The simplicity, the accessibility since it's on mobile, and the super cheap price make this game so worth it, which is why it's number 6 on this list. Next is a roguelike that was tough to place, and that's Sifu. It released on February 8th and is a fighting roguelike game. You play as an unnamed martial artist who is seeking revenge on a gang that killed his or her family. You play through a handful of levels and just beat the crap out of people. Sifu is probably the hardest game on this list to master and win, but was very satisfying when I did eventually win. The game still gets updates to this day, adding small new features, but there isn't much added content to keep replayability super high. The combat is super fun though, and the XP system where you unlock new combat moves when you die is just fun and engaging. I didn't feel much desire to do it again after beating it, but it's so high on this list because of how fun that first run really is. I was trying to clear each level without dying because every time you die in the game, your character gets older, and once they reach their 70s, they'll die and you have to restart your run. The price is also quite expensive for how much content you have, but a completed run could take you about 20 hours or so depending on how good you are at fighting games, and it does have 2 different endings that you can discover, but overall, it's a really fun game. I made a video on Sifu as well saying it could have been Game of the Year, but it's definitely not Game of the Year, but it is number 5 in my roguelites of 2022. Next is a game that released into early access in 2020, but fully released this year, and even to this day is still getting a lot of changes, and that's Revita. It left early access on April 21st, and is a twin-stick action platformer roguelite where you play as an unnamed child who's ascending a clock tower. Revita's like Astro Ascent, as in there's so much to talk about, but so little time. It's another game that I made a video on, and you can watch it to learn a lot more, but inside of a run, you sacrifice your health to gain relics that give you buffs in the run. Each run consists of 5 floors, with each floor having 12 levels. Inside of a run, you have multiple areas as well that give you relics, health, secondary weapons, just straight up information. Outside of a run, you can spend in-game currency on unlocking new relic, hats that add nothing to the game at all except cute cosmetic, weapons to start with, and enhancements to the hub world. The game offers hundreds of relics, and really so much that I haven't even discovered yet. This game has so much passion behind it, I'm surprised it's not bigger and more popular. When you get your first clear in the game, you unlock shards, which are difficulty enhancers basically, and the game has so many shards. Really, it seems like the difficulty enhancers are endless, and the amount of secret rooms you can discover and how many different types of runs you can get really helps keep this game fresh, and it deserves the number 4 spot. I had a lot of fun with Revita, and it could easily deserve a lot more, but there were 3 more roguelites this year that I had more fun with. Number 3 is the final early access game on this list, and it's Have a Nice Death. It released into early access on March 8th and has had a lot of big updates to add content. They recently released an update to add a 5th world to the game, but I have yet to get that far in it. I've played it, I just stink at the game. I'll talk about the game in its current state compared to when it first got released. If you want to learn about that, just go watch my previous videos. Of course, I made a video on this game as well. But currently, you go through 5 worlds, with each world having 6 floors, and then in a boss fight. After clearing a floor, you get to choose between a list of 3 floors to go to next, and they usually end up giving you an item, a curse, a health item, or you could even fight a mini boss. Inside of a run, you have your main weapon, the scythe, and then you can have 2 secondary weapons that either have a traditional cooldown or uses mana. I will say that mana related weapons items are much stronger, and it's much easier to get a broken build with them. With the most recent updates to the game, it's allowed you to pick between 2 worlds on World 2 and 3, with each world having different bosses and enemies. I have to say that both of them, one of them is much easier than the other, and a successful run could take about 30 minutes to an hour, really. Depends on how fast you go through each level, as the levels have a lot of enemies to fight, but it's not really required to fight them all. Outside of a run is very simple though. You don't have anything to upgrade, but you can buy weapons and healing items that will appear in the run with the currency ingots. You also are allowed to take contracts before each run, which will either help you or screw you if you don't get them done. The runs are fast, hard, and easy to replay. A lot of different item variety, and once you actually clear a run, you can enable breakdowns, which is the game's difficulty enhancer. The game has about 13 breakdown levels if I'm not mistaken, but I've only got to breakdown 3. They make the game so much harder, which is fun. Really, this is one of the best roguelites of the year, and I'm really excited to see what else they can add, because the game may still be in early access, but to be honest, this game feels really complete. Number 2 is probably the game you expected to be number 1, but it just does not have enough content for me to justify it in the number 1 spot. And that's Cult of the Lamb, probably the biggest indie game of the year, and a lot of people's favorite roguelite of the year. It released August 19th and took the gaming world by storm for a week or so. You play as this cute little lamb and make a cult. The game is part town building and part action adventure with some roguelite mixed in. You recruit followers in the middle of your dungeon runs, and then you can tell them to do whatever. Farm, mine, eat anything. And if you're a Twitch streamer, you can name all of your followers after your Twitch chat. The game had great Twitch integration. The roguelike elements are in town as you upgrade with sermons and faith from your followers. You unlock new buildings, new capes for your lamb that change some stats, and unlock new types of weapons to find along with some benefits like more health. Really, this is another game I've made a video on. That video tells you everything. I personally love this game though. I played through it and got all the achievements and did everything possible all in about 30 hours of game time, which isn't too bad for a $25 price tag. The combat was very simple and fun. Nothing too serious to learn, just gotta know when to dodge and attack. There were some bugs here and there on release, like randomly dying to nothing, but that doesn't take away from how good it was. The difficulty enhancers don't really exist though outside of setting the game's difficulty, and that just determines how much health you start with in a run. What stops this from being my number 1 game this year is replayability and lack of content. The devs have said they're making more content for the game and even add in multiplayer, but for now, after clearing the game, I got no reason to go back and play some more. But still, it's a great game overall, and I can see why a lot of people would say it's their favorite roguelite of the year. It's still probably going to win tons of awards at the end of the year though. Now before we go to number 1, let's have a few honorable mentions that did not make the cut, but I did play this year and had some good fun with. Firstly, we'll have a game I discovered a little too late, and that's Dome Keeper, a roguelite survival miner game where you defend your dome from waves of monsters, and after each run is done, you dig below for valuable resources and upgrades. Didn't have time to play it for this video, but maybe there'll be a video for it on its own, or maybe one's already out, who knows with how I work. Next, we have Played Up, the fun kitchen roguelite game where if you piss off one customer, you lose. This is the wackiest roguelite I've played this year, and guess what? I made a video on it. But really, it's good fun for serving up some food. I find it can be tedious after a few hours by yourself, but it having multiplayer more than makes up for it and adds some good laughs. And the last honorable mention will go to Eyes in the Dark. Really, a game I thoroughly enjoyed and played a good amount of. A side-scroller twin-stick shooter roguelite as you travel through a mansion destroying darkness with a flashlight as your main weapon. I love the graphics, the story is okay, and I wanted to get all the achievements and even have it in this top 10. But this game had a lot of problems and I crashed a lot. Good game, but not good enough to keep me engaged after one too many crashes. And finally, at the number 1 spot for my favorite roguelikes this year is Rogue Legacy 2. This game is absolutely amazing. I made a video on it as well and have played it for about 40 hours and loved every minute. You go through your castle and every time you die, your children succeed you. The game is incredible with the amount of variety in every run. There's a handful of different classes to choose from, and each class could have different traits that either buff you or debuff you. The money you make in every single run can be used to upgrade your castle, which buffs you directly in your run, and then you can also buy and upgrade armor and runes, which will buff you in the run as well. You lose all of your money before every run though, so you gotta be careful. Really, the combat is so simple in this game, but it's the most fun combat I've played in a roguelike game this year by far. It's very challenging, but very easy to pick up and start another run. And the game allows you to easily fast travel across the map, so you don't get stuck replaying through the same areas. A run consists of 6 biomes, with each biome housing stronger enemies and ending in a boss. Even after beating your first run, the game goes straight into New Game Plus, which makes your next run even harder. It has so many options for New Game Plus that the game just gets insanely hard. I wish I've done more in the game, but Rogue Legacy 2 captured me with its cute graphics, simple gameplay and combat, but still challenging combat, wide variety of items and characters and upgrades for your castle, and amazing difficulty enhancers. It was a tough choice between Rogue Legacy 2 and Cult of the Lamb for my number 1 spot, but I feel the difficulty enhancers and the replayability really give Rogue Legacy 2 the edge in that matter, and that's why it's my #1 roguelite of the year. And that's my list. I hope you liked it. I wish I could have included more, but then this video would be longer than it already is. If your favorite game wasn't on this list, let me know in the comments so I can go check it out and maybe make a video on it. Love making videos on random indie games when I can, but sometimes it's fun to mix in a big project, so I hope you enjoyed it. And a huge shout out to the people that support me on Patreon. I really do appreciate your patience, and your support means the world to me. Like and subscribe this video if you, well, liked it, I guess, and I'll see you next time.